My parents taught me that family always comes first, until they secretly gave my house to my sister and left me with the mortgage payments. What I discovered next would shatter everything I believed about the people who raised me. I'm Rebecca Martinez, and for 8 years, I thought I was building my future. Every month, like clockwork, I'd transfer $2,147 from my checking account to pay the mortgage on what I believed was my house, the house my parents helped me buy when I was 25. The house where I'd planned to raise my own family someday, the house that was supposed to be my biggest investment. But family betrayal doesn't announce itself with dramatic music or warning signs. It hides in paperwork, whispered conversations, and the kind of manipulation so subtle you don't see it coming until it's too late. According to recent studies, 67% of family financial betrayals involve property transfers. And I was about to become another statistic. It started on a Tuesday morning in March. I was organizing my home office, sorting through 8 years of financial documents for tax season, when I found an envelope I'd never seen before. Mixed between my utility bills and insurance papers was an official document from the county recorder's office. My hands shook as I read the header: Property Transfer Deed, Martinez Family Residence. The room started spinning. There, in black and white, was my address, my house, but the name on the transfer wasn't mine. It was my sister Jennifer's. The psychology of family betrayal operates on a level most people can't comprehend until they experience it themselves. Your brain literally cannot process that the people who are supposed to protect you are the ones destroying you. It's called cognitive dissonance. When reality contradicts everything you believed to be true, your mind fractures trying to make sense of it. I called my sister immediately, my voice barely steady enough to speak. "Jennifer, I found some paperwork about the house. Can you explain what this means?" The silence on the other end lasted forever. Then came the words that changed everything. "Oh, that, yeah, Mom and Dad transferred it to me last year. They said you knew." 8 years, 8 years of mortgage payments, 8 years of believing I was building equity, investing in my future, creating stability. And they'd simply given it away, without telling me, without asking, without any consideration for the fact that I'd been paying for it this entire time. The golden child versus responsible child dynamic is one of the most devastating forms of family manipulation. According to family psychology research, parents often designate one child as the achiever who handles all responsibilities, while another becomes the favorite who receives all benefits. I'd been so conditioned to be the responsible one, the one who takes care of everyone else, that I never questioned why I was always the one paying, while my sister was always the one receiving. But the red flags had been there all along. I just hadn't wanted to see them. For years, my parents had praised me for being so responsible with money, while simultaneously making financial decisions about my life without including me. They'd insisted I handle the mortgage payments because it would build my credit, but they'd kept the property deed discussions private. When Jennifer couldn't make rent, they'd suggest she visit me for extended periods. When she needed a car, they'd ask if she could borrow mine indefinitely. I'd been the ATM disguised as the golden child, while Jennifer was the actual golden child disguised as the struggling one. The warning signs of family financial abuse are devastatingly common, yet most people miss them because they're wrapped in language of love and responsibility. Here's what I wish I'd recognized earlier. Parents who make major financial decisions For your own good without your input or consent. Check. They'd insisted on handling all the complicated paperwork while I focused on payments. Family members who receive benefits from your financial contributions, while you receive only obligations. Check. Jennifer got housing security while I got debt responsibility. Emotional manipulation disguised as family values. Check. Family takes care of family was their motto, but it only applied to me taking care of everyone else. Information control and selective transparency. Check. I knew every detail about my payment obligations, but nothing about the ownership structure or long-term plans. The responsible child trap, where your reliability becomes the justification for your exploitation. Double check. My financial stability had made me the obvious choice to handle things, while my sister's instability made her the obvious choice to need protection. The most painful realization was that this wasn't an accident or oversight. This was a calculated, long-term strategy to use my sense of family loyalty against me. They'd known exactly what they were doing, and they'd counted on my love for them to keep me compliant. Research shows that 52% of Americans experience financial stress related to family obligations, but family financial abuse goes deeper than just money. It's about power, control, and the weaponization of love. When your own parents orchestrate your financial exploitation while making you grateful for the privilege, the psychological damage can last a lifetime. But sometimes, the most devastating betrayals also become the most liberating wake-up calls. The morning after my conversation with Jennifer, I woke up with absolute clarity for the first time in 8 years. The fog of confusion, self-doubt, and family loyalty had lifted, replaced by something much more powerful: strategic thinking. I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to try to understand their reasoning or fix this through family therapy and heart-to-heart conversations. Those are victim responses, and I was done being a victim. Instead, I was going to become something my family had never seen before: a strategic opponent. The transformation from victim to strategist doesn't happen overnight, but it starts with one crucial realization. The people who betrayed you did so because they believed you would never fight back. They counted on your love, your loyalty, your ingrained patterns of compliance. They never considered what would happen if you stopped playing by their rules and started playing by yours. My first strategic decision was deceptively simple. I was going to stop paying the mortgage immediately. This wasn't an emotional reaction. This was calculated psychological warfare. If they wanted to give away my house without telling me, they could also handle the financial consequences without my help. I'd been subsidizing their generosity for 8 years. That ended now. But stopping payments was just the beginning. I needed legal consultation, evidence gathering, and most importantly, I needed to understand exactly what they'd done and whether it could be undone. The next morning, I called Martinez and Associates, a real estate law firm downtown. I need to speak with someone about property transfer fraud, I told the receptionist. Within 2 hours, I was sitting across from attorney Sarah Chen, watching her face change as she reviewed my documents. "Ms. Martinez," she said slowly, "this is potentially criminal fraud. If you've been making mortgage payments on a property that was transferred without your knowledge or consent, especially if you were led to believe you had ownership interests, this could constitute several felonies. Finally, Someone was treating this situation with the seriousness it deserved. Attorney Chen explained that property transfer without the knowledge of someone making mortgage payments could violate multiple laws: fraud, elder abuse, even though I wasn't elderly, the pattern was similar, and potentially conspiracy if my parents and sister had planned this together. But here's what made this situation even more legally explosive. My name was still on the mortgage. They'd transferred the property to Jennifer, but they'd left me responsible for the debt. In legal terms, this created a situation where I had all the liability and none of the benefits, a clear case of unjust enrichment. What happens if I stop making payments? I asked. Well, Attorney Chen smiled grimly, then whoever owns the property will have to deal with foreclosure proceedings. And since your sister now owns it, she'll be the one getting the foreclosure notices. For the first time in weeks, I smiled. But I needed more than legal strategy. I needed evidence, I needed documentation, and I needed to understand exactly how long this betrayal had been in planning. That evening, I began what I called my evidence collection project. I gathered 8 years of bank statements showing my mortgage payments. I printed emails between my parents and me discussing our house improvements and future plans. I documented every conversation where they'd referred to it as my house, my investment, my future. Most importantly, I requested all property records from the county recorder's office. What I discovered made my blood run cold. The property transfer to Jennifer had happened 18 months ago. 18 months of me making mortgage payments on a house that was no longer legally mine. 18 months of family dinners where they had discussed my house and my investment while knowing the truth. 18 months of deliberate, calculated deception. But the evidence revealed something even more damning. My parents had also taken out a home equity line of credit against the property just 6 months before transferring it to Jennifer. They'd essentially stolen from the house twice, once by taking my equity through the HELOC, and again by giving the property away while leaving me with the mortgage debt. This wasn't just family betrayal. This was systematic financial fraud. The psychological shift from heartbroken daughter to strategic prosecutor was complete. I wasn't dealing with family anymore. I was dealing with criminals who happened to share my DNA. My next call was to Jennifer, but this time I wasn't calling as her confused, hurt little sister. I was calling as someone who now understood exactly what she'd been complicit in. "Jennifer, we need to talk about the house," I said when she answered. "Rebecca, I know you're upset, but Mom and Dad explained everything. They said you were okay with the transfer because you wanted to help me get stable." The lie was so casual, so practiced, that I almost admired its audacity. They'd built an entire narrative to justify their fraud, and they'd all agreed to stick to it. "That's interesting," I replied calmly, "because I have 8 years of bank records showing I've been making every mortgage payment. I also have the county records showing the transfer happened without my knowledge 18 months ago. So either Mom and Dad lied to you about my consent, or you've been knowingly complicit in fraud." The silence stretched so long, I thought she'd hung up. I don't understand what you're saying." "I'm saying that starting today, I'm not making any more mortgage payments. If you own the house, you can pay for it. And if you can't, you can deal with the foreclosure proceedings." "Rebecca, you can't be serious. What about family? What about helping each other?" Family doesn't commit fraud against each other, Jennifer. What you're thinking of is called crime. That's when I heard my father's voice in the background, and I realized this conversation was about to become much more interesting. Jennifer had me on speakerphone, and my parents were coaching her responses. "Put Dad on the phone," I said. "Rebecca, honey," came my father's voice, dripping with the condescending tone he'd used to manage me my entire life. "I think there's been a misunderstanding. Let's all sit down and talk this through like adults." "The only misunderstanding," I replied, "is that you thought I'd never figure out what you did. But here's what's going to happen instead. I've already consulted with a lawyer. I've gathered all the financial evidence, and I've documented every lie you've told me over the past 18 months. I could hear whispering, frantic planning, damage control mode activation. "Now," I continued, "you have two choices. You can immediately reverse the property transfer and compensate me for 18 months of mortgage payments I made on Jennifer's behalf, or you can explain your fraud to a judge, because those are your only two options." My father's voice changed, losing its fake warmth and revealing the authoritarian anger underneath. "Rebecca, you're being ridiculous. Family doesn't sue family. We raised you better than this." "You raised me to be compliant while you robbed me blind," I shot back. "But you forgot to teach me to stay stupid forever." That's when my mother's voice joined the call, high-pitched with panic. "Rebecca, please don't do anything rash. Let's meet this weekend and work this out." "The time for working things out was before you committed fraud," I said. "I'll be in touch through my attorney." And I hung up. For the first time in 8 years, I felt like I was in control of my own life. They'd built their entire scheme on my predictable compliance, my family loyalty, my inability to imagine they could betray me so completely. But now the game had changed, and I was ready to play by entirely different rules. The evidence was overwhelming, the legal case was solid, and most importantly, I'd stopped being their victim and started being their opponent. What happened next would determine whether justice was possible or whether I'd have to create it myself. But first, I had to prepare for what I knew was coming. They would try to manipulate, guilt trip, and gaslight me back into compliance. They would play every emotional card they'd used to control me for 33 years. The difference was, now I knew exactly what they were doing. And I was ready. 3 weeks had passed since I'd stopped making mortgage payments and consulted my attorney. 3 weeks of strategic silence while I documented everything and built my legal case. 3 weeks of my family probably assuming I'd calm down and fall back into my old patterns of compliance. They were about to learn how wrong they were. It was a Saturday morning when I saw the moving truck pull up to my house. Not Jennifer's house, not our family house. My house. The one I'd been paying for faithfully for 8 years while they orchestrated their fraud behind my back. I watched from my living room window as my parents climbed out of their sedan, followed by Jennifer and her boyfriend Marcus. They moved with the casual confidence of people who believed they were entitled to whatever they wanted. My mother was even carrying her favorite throw pillows, as if this was just a normal family moving day, instead of the climax of an 18-month fraud scheme. The audacity was breathtaking. My phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer. "We're here with our stuff. Can you open the door? Thanks." The casual presumption in that message told me everything I needed to know about how they'd planned this. They'd simply assumed I would comply, just like I always had. They'd counted on my ingrained patterns of family loyalty and conflict avoidance to make me step aside while they moved into the house I'd been paying for. They had no idea who they were dealing with now. I opened my front door and stepped onto the porch, but I didn't invite them in. Instead, I crossed my arms and positioned myself directly in the doorway, making it clear that nobody was entering this house without my explicit permission. "What are you doing here?" I asked, my voice calm but ice cold. My father stepped forward with his practiced patriarch smile, the one he'd used to manage me my entire life. "Rebecca, honey, we're just helping Jennifer get settled. We thought we'd stay for a few weeks to help with the transition." "Transition to what?" "Well, you know," my mother chimed in, her voice artificially bright. "Now that the house is in Jennifer's name, we thought it would be nice for all of us to spend some time together, like a family vacation." The sheer psychological manipulation in that statement was stunning. They were trying to reframe their fraud as a family bonding opportunity, complete with the implicit suggestion that refusing would make me the bad guy who didn't want to spend time with family. "Let me make sure I understand this correctly," I said, my attorney's coaching kicking in. "You secretly transferred my house to Jennifer 18 months ago. Let me continue paying the mortgage for a house I didn't own. And now you want to move in for a family vacation without asking me?" Jennifer stepped forward, her expression a mixture of defiance and desperation. "Rebecca, this is my house now. Mom and Dad explained everything to you already." Actually, they didn't explain anything to me, which is why I found out about the transfer by accident. But here's what I've explained to my attorney. This is fraud, conspiracy, and theft. Would you like me to explain that to the police too? The moving truck driver, who'd been unloading boxes this entire time, stopped what he was doing and looked at our family with obvious concern. The last thing my parents wanted was witnesses to this conversation, and they knew it. "Rebecca," my father said, his voice dropping to a threatening tone I remembered from childhood. "You're embarrassing yourself. Let's go inside and discuss this privately." "No." The simple word hung in the air like a gunshot. For 33 years, I'd never said no to my father directly, especially not in front of other people. The shock on his face was worth everything I'd been through. "Excuse me," he said, his authority shaken. I said, "No, you're not coming into my house. You're not staying here for a vacation, and you're certainly not moving Jennifer in without my consent." My mother tried a different approach, her eyes filling with crocodile tears. "Rebecca, how can you treat your family this way? We raised you better than this. Family takes care of family." "Family doesn't commit fraud against family," I replied, using the exact words I'd practiced with my attorney. "Family doesn't lie for 18 months about property ownership, and family doesn't show up with moving trucks expecting their victims to accommodate their crime spree." Jennifer's boyfriend, Marcus, who'd been silent up until this point, apparently decided to help. "Look, lady, Jennifer owns this house now, so we're moving in. You can either make this easy or make this hard, but we're going in." That was exactly the wrong thing to say, and exactly what I'd been hoping for. Now I had witnesses to their threats and attempted forced entry. "Sir," I said loudly enough for the moving truck driver to hear clearly, "you're threatening to force your way into my home without permission. That's called breaking and entering, and it's a felony. I pulled out my phone and began recording. This is Rebecca Martinez, and it's Saturday, April 15th, at approximately 10:30 a.m. I'm standing in the doorway of my home at 847 Oak Street, which I've been paying the mortgage on for 8 years. My family has shown up with a moving truck, attempting to move in without my permission after fraudulently transferring the property to my sister without my knowledge. My father lunged for my phone, but I stepped back into my house and slammed the door, locking it immediately. Through the window, I could see him pacing furiously while my mother and Jennifer argued with each other. Marcus was yelling something about property rights, clearly not understanding that the mortgage holder has legal occupancy rights regardless of deed ownership. My phone rang immediately. It was Jennifer. "Rebecca, open this door right now. This is my house." "Actually," I said calmly, "according to my attorney, since I'm the mortgage holder and this transfer was done without my knowledge or consent, I have every legal right to occupy this property until the ownership dispute is resolved, which means you're trespassing." "That's ridiculous. Mom and Dad said you agreed to this." "Show me my signature on any document agreeing to transfer this property. Show me any written communication where I consented to this arrangement. Show me any evidence at all that I was informed about or agreed to this transfer." The silence told me everything I needed to know. "You can't," I continued, "because it doesn't exist, because this was fraud and you all know it." Through my window, I watched my father on his phone, probably calling his own attorney or trying to figure out his legal options. Good luck with that, I thought. My attorney had already researched this extensively. 20 minutes later, a police car pulled up to my house. Perfect. My father had apparently decided to escalate this to law enforcement, probably assuming that his version of events would be more believable than mine. He'd obviously never considered that I might have spent the last 3 weeks preparing for exactly this moment. Officer Rodriguez approached my door and knocked politely. I opened it with my phone still recording and my legal documents in hand. "Ma'am, we received a call about a family dispute regarding property access. Can you explain what's happening here?" "Certainly, officer. I'm Rebecca Martinez, and I've been paying the mortgage on this property for 8 years. Recently, I discovered that my parents fraudulently transferred the deed to my sister 18 months ago without my knowledge or consent, while allowing me to continue making all mortgage payments. I handed him copies of my bank records, the property transfer documents, and my attorney's letter outlining the legal issues. My family showed up today with a moving truck, demanding entry to move into my house. When I refused, they became threatening and insisted they had the right to force entry. Officer Rodriguez reviewed my documents while my father approached, clearly confident that his charm and authority would carry the day. "Officer, this is all a big misunderstanding," my father began. "This is a family property, and there's been some confusion about the arrangements. My daughter Rebecca is being emotional and unreasonable. Sir, according to these mortgage records, Ms. Martinez has been making all payments on this property. Do you have documentation showing her consent to the property transfer?" My father's confident expression faltered. "Well, it was a family arrangement. We don't typically document every conversation. So that's a no," Officer Rodriguez said flatly. "Ma'am," he turned to me, As the mortgage holder and current occupant, you have legal right to refuse entry until this ownership dispute is resolved through proper legal channels. He turned to my family. I'm going to need you all to leave the property. This is a civil matter that needs to be resolved in court, not on someone's front lawn. Jennifer erupted. This is insane. It's my house. They gave it to me. Ma'am, property disputes are handled through the courts, not through forced entry. You'll need to resolve this legally. As my family reluctantly returned to their cars, my father shot me a look of pure rage. This isn't over, Rebecca. You're right, I replied loud enough for Officer Rodriguez to hear. It's not over, it's just beginning. The moving truck driver, looking thoroughly confused and irritated, began reloading all the boxes they'd unloaded. Marcus continued yelling about property rights until Jennifer finally told him to shut up. My mother cried dramatically, probably hoping the officer would feel sorry for her. But Officer Rodriguez had seen enough domestic disputes to recognize manipulation when he saw it. He handed me his card and advised me to document everything going forward. As they drove away, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: complete victory. They'd tried to use their standard manipulation playbook against me, and it had backfired spectacularly. They'd involved law enforcement expecting support, and instead had been told to leave my property. Most importantly, they now understood that I wasn't the compliant daughter they'd exploited for 8 years. I was someone entirely different, and I was prepared to fight, but I knew this was just the beginning of their retaliation campaign. 2 days after the failed moving truck incident, my phone started ringing at 6 a.m. It was my mother, crying hysterically. Rebecca, how could you do this to us? We're your family. Jennifer is homeless now because of you. Jennifer is homeless because you committed fraud, not because I discovered it, I replied calmly. But you know she can't afford rent anywhere else. You know she's struggling. How can you be so cruel to your own sister? The guilt tripping was exactly what I'd expected, but it bounced off me like armor now. Mom, let me explain something to you. Jennifer isn't struggling because of me. Jennifer is struggling because instead of learning how to support herself, she learned to exploit her family. That's a choice she made with your help. Rebecca, please, can't we work something out? Can't Jennifer stay there temporarily while she figures things out? Sure, I said sweetly. Jennifer can stay here temporarily if she pays me back the $51,246 I've paid in mortgage payments on her behalf over the last 18 months, plus interest, plus compensation for the fraud. She can also cover the legal fees I've incurred because of your crime. The crying stopped immediately. That's ridiculous. We don't have that kind of money. Then she doesn't have housing. Funny how that works. My mother hung up on me, but the calls didn't stop. Over the next week, I received daily calls from various family members, all delivering the same message with slight variations. I was being selfish, unreasonable, cruel, and vindictive. I was destroying the family. I was hurting people I claimed to love. My Aunt Maria called to tell me I was breaking your mother's heart. My cousin David called to say I was being dramatic about a simple misunderstanding. Even my grandmother called to remind me that family forgives family. The flying monkey campaign was in full swing, but I'd prepared for this too. My attorney had warned me that family financial abusers always launch character assassination campaigns when their victims fight back. They recruit other family members to pressure the victim into compliance, usually by portraying the abuser as the real victim and the actual victim as selfish or vindictive. I had a prepared response for each caller. I'm sorry you've been given incorrect information about this situation. If you'd like to understand what really happened, I'd be happy to show you the legal documents, but I won't be discussing my decision to pursue justice for financial fraud. Most of them hung up immediately, which told me everything I needed to know about their actual concern for the truth. But the harassment escalated beyond phone calls. On Friday afternoon, I discovered that my parents had posted about our family dispute on Facebook, painting themselves as heartbroken parents whose ungrateful daughter had turned against family over a simple misunderstanding. The post was carefully crafted to generate sympathy without admitting to any wrongdoing. The comments were predictably supportive of my parents, with friends and extended family expressing shock at my selfishness and offering to help my victimized family members. That's when I realized it was time to tell the complete truth publicly. I created my own Facebook post, but mine included documentation. I posted photos of the mortgage statements, the property transfer documents, and my attorney's letter explaining the legal issues. I provided an exact timeline of events with evidence for every claim. My post was titled, "When Your Family Commits Fraud Against You, a Case Study in Financial Abuse." I wrote, "For 8 years, I've been paying the mortgage on what I believed was my house. 3 weeks ago, I discovered that my parents secretly transferred this property to my sister 18 months ago, while allowing me to continue making all payments. This constitutes several forms of fraud, which is why I'm pursuing legal action. I'm sharing this not for sympathy, but for education. Family financial abuse is real, and it's often disguised as helping each other or family arrangements. If this is happening to you, know that you have legal rights and options." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within hours, I had dozens of comments from people sharing their own stories of family financial abuse. People who'd had parents take out credit cards in their names. People whose siblings had stolen inheritances. People whose spouses had hidden assets during divorces. People whose families had used their credit scores and financial responsibility against them. But more importantly, I also heard from people who knew my family personally and had witnessed suspicious behavior over the years. My neighbor, Mrs. Chen, commented that she'd wondered why Jennifer was looking at houses in the neighborhood while I was the one always doing yard work and maintenance on my house. My father's coworker mentioned that my dad had bragged about setting up his daughters with property investments, which now sounded much more sinister in context. The public documentation strategy was working exactly as my attorney had predicted. Instead of being portrayed as the unreasonable daughter attacking her innocent family, I was now clearly established as the victim of a systematic fraud scheme. My parents' response was swift and desperate. My father called me screaming about airing family business in public and destroying our reputation. My mother left tearful voicemails about how I was humiliating them and ruining relationships with the extended family. But the most telling response came from Jennifer, who sent me a private message. "Rebecca, I didn't know you were still paying the mortgage when they transferred the house to me. I thought you'd already stopped paying, and they were just helping me avoid foreclosure. Can we talk?" Finally, the first crack in their united front. I forwarded Jennifer's message to my attorney immediately. This was the confession we'd been waiting for. Acknowledgement that the transfer had been presented to her differently than it had actually occurred, and that she hadn't known I was still making payments. But I wasn't ready to talk to Jennifer privately yet. If she wanted to confess to her role in this fraud, she could do it through proper legal channels with her own attorney present. Instead, I sent her a simple reply. All communication about this matter needs to go through my attorney. If you want to discuss your involvement in this fraud, you can contact Sarah Chen at Martinez & Associates. That evening, my attorney called me with updates that exceeded even my most optimistic expectations. Rebecca, your sister's message creates significant legal problems for your parents. If Jennifer claims she didn't know you were still making mortgage payments, then your parents lied to her about the arrangement, which could constitute additional fraud charges. But if she did know and participated anyway, she's an accomplice to the original fraud. What does that mean practically? It means your sister now has strong incentive to cooperate with us against your parents to minimize her own legal exposure. And your parents are facing the possibility of criminal charges in addition to the civil lawsuit. For the first time since this nightmare began, I started to believe that actual justice was possible, but the best news was yet to come. There's something else, Attorney Chen continued. I've been investigating the home equity line of credit your parents took out before transferring the property. Since they took out debt against property they were planning to transfer without the knowledge of the mortgage holder, this constitutes additional fraud. The bank that issued the HELOC has grounds to demand immediate repayment, and when they discover the circumstances, they'll likely pursue criminal charges themselves. So you're saying my parents might face criminal charges from multiple sources? I'm saying your parents have committed so many different types of fraud that they're looking at potential federal charges. Wire fraud, mail fraud, bank fraud, conspiracy. This case has everything prosecutors love. I hung up the phone, feeling something I'd forgotten was possible. Hope for actual consequences. That weekend, the foreclosure notice arrived. Since I'd stopped making mortgage payments 6 weeks earlier, the bank had initiated foreclosure proceedings against the property. But here's the beautiful irony. Since Jennifer was now the legal owner, she was the one receiving the foreclosure notices. She was the one whose credit would be destroyed. She was the one who would lose the house if the situation wasn't resolved. My parents had successfully transferred their fraud consequences to their favorite daughter. Jennifer called me in a panic. "Rebecca, I got a foreclosure notice. What am I supposed to do?" "You're supposed to make the mortgage payments," I replied calmly. "It's your house, remember?" "But I can't afford mortgage payments. You know I don't have that kind of money." "Then you shouldn't have accepted ownership of a house with a mortgage you couldn't afford." "Rebecca, please, can't you just keep paying until we figure this out?" "Figure what out? You committed fraud. The consequences of fraud include losing the thing you fraudulently obtained. This is what justice looks like." She hung up on me, but called back 10 minutes later. "What if I transfer the house back to you? Would you start making payments again?" Finally, the first real offer to undo their crime. "Jennifer, any property transfers at this point need to go through my attorney and include full restitution for the fraud. If you want to discuss resolving this legally, you know who to call." 3 days later, Attorney Chen called with the news I'd been waiting for. "Rebecca, your parents' attorney contacted me. They want to settle." "What are they offering?" "Full property transfer back to you, reimbursement for all mortgage payments made during the fraudulent period with interest, coverage of all your legal fees, and a formal written apology acknowledging the wrongdoing. And in exchange, you agree not to pursue criminal charges and to remove your social media post about the fraud." I thought about it for exactly 3 seconds. Counter offer, they give me everything you just listed, plus an additional $50,000 in punitive damages for emotional distress and the 18 months of fraud. They also provide Jennifer with alternative housing for 6 months, while she gets her life together without exploiting family members. And I keep the social media post up permanently as a warning to others about family financial abuse. "Rebecca, that's a very aggressive counteroffer. They committed very aggressive fraud. Besides, if they don't accept it, they can explain their crimes to a federal prosecutor instead. I'm pretty sure prison sentences cost more than settlement payments." 2 weeks later, I had my house back, my money back, and the most expensive education of my life about the difference between family and people who happen to share your DNA. But more importantly, I had something I'd never possessed before: unshakable boundaries and the knowledge that I was capable of protecting myself from anyone, including the people who raised me. The foreclosure proceedings were dismissed. The property was legally transferred back to me with clear title. Jennifer moved into a small apartment across town, funded by our parents for 6 months as part of the settlement. And my parents learned that their former victim was now their permanent adversary. I kept the Facebook post up, just like I'd promised, not out of spite, but as a service to other people who might be experiencing family financial abuse without recognizing it. Within 6 months, I'd received over 200 private messages from people sharing similar stories and asking for advice about their own situations. I'd connected dozens of victims with attorneys, therapists, and support resources. Most importantly, I'd learned that justice is possible, but only when you stop being the victim and start being the person who refuses to accept abuse in any form, from anyone, for any reason. My parents and I don't speak anymore. Jennifer and I have limited contact, mostly civil but distant. Some family members still think I overreacted to a family misunderstanding, but I sleep peacefully in my house every night, knowing that I own it completely and legally. I make my mortgage payments with pride now, because I know exactly what I'm paying for and why. And I've never again wondered whether someone I trust is secretly plotting to exploit my love for them. Sometimes the best gift your family can give you is showing you exactly who they really are, so you can decide whether you want them in your life or not. I chose not, and for the first time in 33 years, that choice was entirely mine to make.